live from Sister Basebone Studio. Urban Teachers Lounge is a platform for bridging the gap between educational scholarship and classroom teachers. Voices will include teachers, administrators, educational scholars, community members, and activists.
Welcome to Urban Teachers Lounge, y'all. This podcast, as you know, is unapologetically for Black teachers, unapologetically by Black teachers. The purpose of the program is to bridge the gap between educational scholarship and classroom teachers. This week, I have a special guest, and this is actually a special extended podcast episode. I will be joined by IyaLami of Holistically Speaking, which is the podcast for Holistic Alchemy. And we're going to do a dual presentation and conversation for you today, where we're going to look at womanist theory. Yes, and we're going to look at how it not only is a part of who we are as women, as Black women, but also how it is a part of our practice. So, grab your cup of coffee and get ready, because this is going to be a good talk today. Hey, everybody. This is Funmilyo DeVoe from Urban Teachers Lounge, and I'm with my guest today and my wife and my partner, and
They're all the same.
all the same. And why don't you say who you are?
Well, greetings. This is IyaLami, and IyaLami with Holistically Speaking. And I am excited to what we're going to call this two podcasts in one.
Two podcasts in one.
So today's episode is an extension of the conversations that my wife and I have in our home, in our car, on our date nights. We are, as you know, PhD students.
Both at Antioch University. Woo woo. Shout out to our school.
And so we're always literally talking and about the work in which we do. And so Funmilyo DeVoe, landed on this amazing article that really it speaks to both of our work. And there are several different articles. We're always shedding, if you will, from her work in education and my work with women. We're both exchanging ideas and expanding our thought processes regarding our research and our work. And so she landed on this article. This article is entitled Historical Womanist Theory, Revisioning Black Feminist Thought.
By Nicole
Rousseau. That's right. By Nicole, Dr. Nicole Rousseau. And so, and we always like to cite Black women.
Yes, we do like to cite Black women, number one.
That's right.
And so this particular podcast, I wanted us to, one, share our research. In case you don't know where our research is, where it lands, we want to first tell you about our individual research towards our dissertations. And two, we want to show, as IyaLami said, we want to show how our work crosses over. And so one of the things when in studying research or reviewing research around education, you begin to realize that you cannot study educational research in a funnel, right? In a tunnel. In a vacuum. You have to look outside of, there are things that affect educational research, and that is historical, that's political, that's social, society. And so with this particular article, it was phenomenal because one, it talked about Black feminism, but it also talks about womanist theory. So one of the things, when we first started this journey 5 years ago in these PhD programs, we were kind of wrestling back and forth on, am I a feminist? Am I a black feminist? Am I a womanist? Today, I think we both have landed on we're womanist.
Yes.
For probably slightly different reasons. And of course, most of the stuff that we're going to give you today, we would definitely add to the bottom of both podcasts so that you can do your own research and hopefully leave questions and comments so we can continue the conversation. So the first thing we wanted to start with is, what is a feminist? What is a black feminist? And what is a womanist? So I'm going to let, do you want to start there? Or because, okay, so my easy definition, and I'll let her be all, politically correct. Feminist is basically the women's liberation movement, but it was designed for and considering white women, number one. Black feminism is when black women decided that we were not included in the original feminist ideology, and black women have a voice, and so we wanted to be included. And of course, when you think about black feminists, you tend to think of the radicals, right? So you think of Bell Hooks, Angela Davis, Patricia Hill Collins, and I'm sure there are many, many others. And then we moved to
Brittney Cooper.
Oh, Brittney Cooper, yes. Well, I don't know. Does she consider herself a black feminist?
I think I've seen.
I like Brittney Cooper.
Yes, I think I've heard that she said that she is a black feminist.
Okay.
Right. So, and there are others that I.
There are others, and then the funny thing is, and I think it's according to timing, meaning what era it was, because Audrey Lorde, she considers herself a feminist, but I think by definition we could put her in black feminist or maybe even womanist definitions. And then the last, but definitely not least, because this is where we're landing for the evening, womanist. So the womanist theory, I'm going to let Mrs. DeVoe speak about womanist theory, which we know most people are familiar with. Alice Walker's, what is it? Womanism is to feminists as purple is to lavender. Yes.
Yes.
So we're going to be flipping some pages. So get ready for the flips. All right, go.
So first of all, I'd like to go back just a few minutes here. So the reason why this particular word womanism and womanist is so important, because it is the theoretical lens in which I am using within my research. And so I landed there because of Alice Walker's definition and Dr. Layli Mariappan, and I always pronounce her name incorrectly, so forgive me, and her understanding and articulation of womanism. But I want to give Alice Walker's definition, and it's a long definition, but it's okay. And it's taken from her novel In Search of My Mother's Gardens. And so a womanist is taken from the term womanish. It is a black feminist or feminist of color. And it's taken from the black folk expression of mothers to female children. You acting womanish or like a woman. Usually referring to outrageous, audacious, courageous, or willful behavior. Wanting to know more and in greater depth than is considered good for one. Interested in grown-up doings, acting grown up, being grown up. And it's interchangeable with another black folk expression, you trying to be grown.
Watch yourself, little girl. Sit down, little girl.
Right. So the second part of that definition says, and this is Alice Walker's definition, a woman who loves other women sexually and or non-sexually, appreciate and prefers women's culture, women's emotional flexibility, meaning values tears as natural counterbalance of laughter, and woman's strength. sometimes loves individual men sexually and or non-sexually, committed to survival and wholeness of entire people, male and female, and not a separatist. A womanist also loves music, loves dance, loves the moon, loves the spirits, loves food, loves love and roundness, loves struggle, loves the folk, loves herself regardless. So a very, very rich, comprehensive definition that Alice Walker provided. And you can see where if you were to go in deep in looking in comparison from black feminism to or even to feminism, I should say, to see some distinct differences, particularly when she talks about committed to the survival and entire of people, including men in this.
Right.
Feminists tend not to want to include men in the conversation
because their experience was entirely different with white males. Mm-hmm. So when you think about that, you definitely, I'm always interested in being contextually considerate, right? So you want to consider when white women were fighting for their rights as a woman, they were fighting against how white men were treating them, and their role in their relationships with white men is very, very different on many accounts, I would assume, with black women and black men. Mm-hmm. So what we do, and most of the time when people hear feminism, any word related to feminism, they naturally assume that you're man bashing, you hate men. And I think my beginning to land on the term womanist and being a womanist is it's all inclusive. That entire definition that IyaLami just shared with us is included of music, dance, love, loving men, loving women, being holistic, and understanding balances, right? So not just one, but understanding yin and yang, so I think it is definitely all inclusive. Right.
And I want to, it's all inclusive. And that is where Laylee Phillips, Dr. Laylee Phillips, has her summation of what womanism is. And she says that it is a social change perspective rooted in black women's and other women of color's everyday experiences. And you can see that within Alice Walker's original definition. And everyday methods of problem solving in everyday spaces, right, extended to the problem of ending all forms of oppression for all people, restoring the balance between people and the environment, nature, and reconciling human life with the spiritual dimension. Right. And so those two, I was drawn really for both of them to womanism because of that, because of the attention to everyday experiences, what Dr. Laylee Phillips says, or Dr. Laylee Mariapon says, and to restoring balance and being connected or reconciling human life with the spiritual dimension. And so, again, it's very rich. And so I don't want us to go too deep into this, the difference between feminism, black feminism, and womanism. What I charge you with is to go forth and to do your own research and determine what resonates with you. Right. So,
and this has been a 5-year event for me because yes. So before I started, a shout out to my friend. She's just recently finished her doctorate degree, and she was working. Her research is around womanism and black administrators, black female administrators. And so I think that was a fabulous work. But at the time that she was working on her dissertation, I was asking her, girl, what is the difference between this and that? And it was just too much. And ironically, I've come full circle into landing on womanism, even after half reading and trying to make meaning and find meaning for myself. So just as she said, I think everybody, it deserves all of us to really read, research, and figure out what resonates most with you. So before we go any further, what I wanted to say.
Well, we didn't talk about our research.
That's what I was getting ready. That's what I was getting ready to say.
Okay.
So one, for my listeners on Urban Teachers Lounge, IyaLami, her podcast is Holistically Speaking. And the way that she's using womanist theory, I want her to elaborate on her research. And then I'm going to show how my womanist theory is landing in education and going along with my current research. So
Holistically Speaking is a podcast that is devoted to all things holistically speaking, well-being, self-care, and self-love for Black women. And so that's the podcast. Now, my research is around the lived experiences of African American women and their bodies. So it started with my whole with body dissatisfaction. And I have suffered or had suffered from body dissatisfaction nearly all my life. And then becoming a holistic wellness coach, I began to work with women who suffered from body dissatisfaction as well. And as a result of conversations with them and having, talks about how do you feel about yourself? Where does this come from? I started to think deeply about what this body, the root of this body dissatisfaction. And so with this, was a series of inner conversations with myself,
right,
and about how do we get over this, and how do we get to this position? Anyway, long story short, my work that I'm going to be doing is working with women and to see how, or to see and to understand the lived experiences of their body living in a gendered and racialized society. And so that is my research. And then, as I said, my podcast is about holistically speaking, all things well-being, self-care. So you're like, how does this work? Well, you'll understand here in just a moment when we start talking about the body. Well, I'm going to start talking about body and means of as being used and as means of production and reproduction. And
don't be telling all the juicy stuff. We ain't even got to that.
Okay.
See, there she go, all the juicy part.
Okay,
this is why we're doing this together. See?
I won't tell you, but just know that this is about our well-being. This is about our well-being. Okay, go.
So, for those of you, I don't know that I've ever fully said what my research is going to be about, or what I'm researching on my podcast. But the research is basically Black teacher displacement and gentrification. And a part of looking at that is understanding who I am, my own positionality. And so understanding the lenses that I look through, which I'll talk about critical race theory in a second, but this is how I landed on the womanist lens, because I show up every day as a woman when I go to work. And so in doing that, I do, the definitions of womanism resonate with me. One of the things she didn't say, and I don't know where we found that information, but the other mothering is a major thing that resonated with me and my friend that I was telling you about earlier. When she did her research, the other mothering is a major piece for Black teachers, Black women teachers. We tend to, even if we don't have children, we treat all of our students as if they belong to us, our children. So we do an other mothering auntie type thing. And so with my research, I have to be aware of how I how I respond to my students, how I present. But also the reason why I landed on womanist theory is because it is inclusive of our men. And so my podcast, Urban Teachers Lounge, is for, unapologetically for Black teachers, unapologetically by Black teachers. So this is also inclusive of our Black male teachers in knowing that we have to be whole together when we're teaching our kids. And there was one more thing that I was going to say, but I've drawn a blank. So looking at the time, because we had to give you all of that background before we can get to the juice. There are 4 things. We're going to stick with these 4 things. The article that we're looking at, historical womanist theory, revisioning Black feminist thought, right? This is a bad article. Oh my God. The article was so fabulous. I have shared it with at least 5 of my coworkers. I've highlighted almost every page and circled.
That doesn't take much.
That don't judge me. So I started with the yellow highlighter, and in going back, I had to use my green highlighter, and then I have my my ink pen mark. So this article, everyone needs to read it. And really digest what she's saying. So the first thing that we want to talk about is, number 1, what is historical womanist theory? What is that definition? Do you want to read that definition?
Sure.
Which it's juicy. Go. Hysteria. No.
Historical womanist theory illustrates how Black women have been historically contextualized as instruments of production.
Stop right there.
Whoa. Let's go. Let me go. Rewind.
Wait, just.
Okay. Yes.
Give it to him again.
Okay.
Give it to him again. This is how I gave you this article.
Yes.
This is like the first page. Oh, no, it's the second page. Okay.
Right. Historical womanist theory illustrates how Black women have been historically contextualized as instruments of production.
Production, y'all. Okay, go.
This theoretical lens situates Black women as a population, number 1, a population of African descent in a nation historically and fundamentally rooted in a racialized slave economy.
Listen to that word, economy. Now go back, racialized slave economy. Okay.
Number 2, women in a profoundly patriarchal structure.
You know what that is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well. And 3, laborers, productive, reproductive, and biological within a capitalist system.
This is when I lost my mind. So 1, you're talking about women of African descent, number 1, that were strategically racialized to be a part of the economy system in this country, number 1. Number 2, patriarchal system. So in my classroom, if you've ever seen a picture of my bulletin board, it says race, gender, and class. And I always ask my students which one won. When you're talking about patriarchal structure, you know that male wins, right? And then the last part is the part, this is where her research and my research hit the pavement. Laborers. So number 3, she says we are productive laborers, reproductive laborers, and then biological within the capitalist system. So basically somebody getting paid on our labor, on our production, on our work, on our everything.
Since
Since the beginning of time.
Since
in America.
Since
US
colonization.
America. Since colonization. And the thievery of coming across the Great Atlantic. I just had to say that.
The women of African descent, particularly because that is who I'm speaking to. That is who I work with. That is my research.
And you also happen to be an African American
I am a woman of African descent.
Oh, okay.
Absolutely. And our bodies have not been our own. Our bodies were molded production. For production and reproduction, we were made breeders.
Now, and the flip side of that is our minds were made for production and reproduction. And this same racialized ideology, this patriarchal structure, we were taught, socialized with this information, right? In order to, as teachers, come on, teachers, as teachers, we're reproducing this same thing. Even if you don't even, now, if you have children, you're reproducing this thought in your home. And then when they go to school, they're getting that thought again. If you're a teacher and a parent, then you're doing it at home and at school. And so this is where we constantly wrestle with what Carter G. Woodson said, the miseducation of the Negro, right? So we have to go back and really rethink how we are falling into, we all are a product of capitalism. And we have to fight that structure every day. And whether you're fighting it in your body, whether you're fighting it in your mind, right? We're not even going to talk about spirit, right? We're going to leave that alone for tonight. That's a whole nother conversation. Okay? And so that was one. That's the definition. Two, the next thing we wanted to look at is private property. So that goes deeper into production, right? So when you understand a woman's body, in her case, in understanding body positivity, right? You're looking at a woman's body as property. But then when I'm looking at it as a teacher, I'm looking at your mind. You're looking at the teacher's mind. So if I make sure that I educate you in a certain way, then you're going to teach that way, and that education is passed on, right? Okay. Private property.
So the Dr. Rousseau says, private property and ownership, which are cornerstones of the capitalist structure. Here again, capitalism.
And cornerstones thereof.
That's right. Private property and ownership, which are cornerstones of the capitalist structure, work in tandem together to maintain the patriarchal domination of women and women's labor.
Which one won? Race, gender, or class? Gender wins. $200.
Very good. And so it stops right there. And actually, she is quoting or quoting from an author by the name of Kalante. And
I think Kalante is the Russian
that's right
author. And they have that particular article was translated.
That's right.
By, was it Alex
Holt? Yes. So
yes. I remember my stuff. Yes. Come on now. It's fresh. I'm feeling good about myself right now.
So, again, when I think about our bodies have not. So when women who struggle with their bodies and the way their bodies look, it goes deeper than, for me, being body positive. Okay. And that's how I started this whole journey, because when I hear and no judgment on those body positive activists who use that term, but for me it goes deeper than being positive about your body. It goes to understanding the structures that have been put in place, this domination of our bodies and minds for centuries, and how that's continued to been perpetuated, and how it's deeply rooted. And so I talk a lot about from roots to liberation. I believe it's important to understand the roots of our oppression. Where does this come from? We have been dominated. Our bodies have been dominated. When colonization was real, and the impact that it had on the way in which we viewed our bodies, we from when the British came, when those people came and they imparted certain ideologies onto African people.
for their own self-interest, for their own economy to build this country. And as she's saying, roots
to liberation.
to liberation, right? Then I'm also looking at on the education side, meaning dealing in education, education for liberation. And it goes back to, again, what have we learned and what are we teaching our children? What are we teaching in the classroom? So yes, I can tell my kids, yes, you can be everything, you can do everything, but I have to give them context. I have to let them understand, no, we know that we were people before slavery. But at the end of the day, we have to understand our context, our position in the context of U.S. society. We are gendered, we are racialized, and we have to understand our Black boys. That's one part of the puzzle, right? How they're dealt with, how our Black girls are being dealt with. But then we have to think of, as the leaders, right? As the teachers, as the educators, we have to consider, how are we teaching? Who taught us? What did they teach us? Was it culturally relevant, right? And was it enough for us to go into these classrooms and fight the man, right? As we try to teach, education for liberation. So private property, if she's talking about private property as our body, right? And people used us as property, and they owned us and continue to use us. And then I'm looking at, we know the prison to pipeline, or the school to prison pipeline, right? That again is ownership. That again is property, right? So if we don't teach our children certain things, they're going to keep making certain mistakes, and then they're going to go right into the trap of being a slave again in the what do they call that? The industrial complex, the prison industrial complex,
yes.
Right? So private property. I'm trying to move us through because I want us to continue to talk.
So let me just pause here. So we are just literally scratching the surface.
Yes,
and so I want you to, again, read about the difference between Black feminism, and womanism. Check out this article by Dr. Nicole Rousseau, The Historical Womanist Theory, Revisioning Black Feminist Thought. And like I said, we are just having an extended conversation and inviting you to this conversation that we have with each other as we are processing this work. And we're going to continue to process this. So bear in mind that this is just scratching the surface,
right,
to hopefully entice you to do some research. Think about who you are. Think about education and what Funmilyo is saying, and then think about the body and the construction of the body and how the body has been used, and then what are the continued what's the continued impact of this power domination, this oppression that we see. And so she's going to talk, and speaking about that, thinking about understanding how race and gender is so important. And so critical race theory speaks to that.
Right. And so the last thing, because we could be here forever, we're only on page 4, okay?
Maybe we need to do a part 2.
Maybe not only do we need to do a part 2, but I would love to add more voices to this table.
Absolutely.
So I would love for folks from Urban Teachers Lounge or folks from Holistically Speaking to definitely join in this conversation. I think it's a fabulous conversation. One of the goals that I have is to bring scholarship to our practical everyday life. What have Black scholars written? What have they said? And how is that still relevant today? So the last thought that we're going to go with, because we're running on time here, critical race theory. So the lens of critical race theory is how we actually think about what we see. So we started out with womanism and understanding, for the Black women that are listening to this, understanding our position as Black women, right? And that's almost a class on itself, but that's a whole nother conversation. And now we want to look at critical race theory. So I'm going to give you a brief definition, and as you look at your everyday experiences, see whether race, did race play into it? Again, going back to my question for kids, was this race, gender, or class? Right? Race, gender, or class. So there are things that are institutionally created where race plays out, right? So critical race theory asserts several key assumptions about race and racism in the U.S. that are key to the framework of this particular article. So CRT, critical race theory, assumes 4 things. Number 1, race is a social construction. Mm-hmm. Can we all agree to that?
Yes.
That race is a social construction. And it's a social construction because divide and conquer is real.
Agreed.
So as long as we sit up here and as long as we divide each other and find differentiate our thinking, right? That's for the teacher side. We're going to have some problems, right? Because somewhere, which moves into number 2, racism is a profoundly embedded necessary element of the U.S. capitalistic structure.
And the operative word is necessary.
And another one is embedded.
Embedded.
So embedded is deeper than, oh, you just holding on to this. No, the only way this system is going to work, and we started with slavery, Black women bodies, but now understanding race, how race is a construct and how it was strategically embedded to make them coins. But we're not. Okay. We're not.
Don't go there.
I'm not, no. But I'm still mad. Okay. Number 3, though presented as such in the new millennium, racism is not a deviant behavior, but a current and historical norm within U.S. capitalist structure. Capitalist structure. Now, I'm saying that because I want you to think about deviant behavior. So somewhere along the line, pretty much after Brown versus Board, somewhere along the line, we got into this thinking that racism is gone. Now that we don't have racism in the law, or separate but equal, and that whole thing, right? Racism is still alive and well. It just looks different. It has evolved. So now, instead of blaming systems, right, which is what we did prior to pre-Brown versus Board, right? Now we're saying that it's individuals. It's not individuals. It is still systems, but we're blaming individuals. Like y'all president. I had to throw that in there. So people are complaining that y'all's president is racist. Well, I'm going to let y'all think about that.
Stop.
Okay, I'm not. I can't. Number 4, racial segregation is a key element of maintaining the system of racism that is so vital to the functioning of the capitalistic structure. Now, for me, looking at my research, this line was important because when you talk about separating, not only do we have segregated schools, right, but they're segregated in another way with housing. So this is the reason why my research is landing around. Look at gentrification as the move of the bike lanes, which I do love to ride my bicycle. I've said this before, but follow the bike lanes. When the bike lanes come into traditionally urban neighborhoods, folks get moved, right? And when folks get moved, at some point you should expect that the school is going to change. The population drops. Either they're going to close the school or they're not going to close the school. The population shifts. And so these are the 4 things when you're looking at race, when you're critically looking at race in your everyday experiences, you have to see what is the root of that. What is the root of moving from the suburbs into the city? So we know when Brown versus Board happened, we know that white flight happened, meaning that white parents, a lot of them, did not want their children to go to school with black children. So white parents who had money, that's class, race, gender, and class, they had money and they could pack up and they moved. But now we're living in the reverse. Mm-hmm. Right? My little DJ skills, wiki. Reverse, right? So now white flight is becoming white return to the city. Mm-hmm. And the question is, where then will the black people go? Probably out into the suburbs. Right. I said it.
Right.
I said it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So then, well,
now come on with it. We already over time, so let's just add.
I was going to add.
Last thought. What you got?
What happens to those school districts that where they've sent?
Exactly. And so this leads us to vouchers. That's a whole nother conversation, school vouchers. Mm-hmm. And then it also leads us to when they closed all the projects in certain big cities and they gave those folks, my folks who lived in the projects, vouchers to go out into the suburbs. Well, the enticement was, oh, this is a good school. Mm-hmm. But is it going to be good when all of the people who originally lived there moved to the city? Mm. So then we are back to pre-Brown versus Board, because you do remember that but at least in the South, black people lived in the country, and the white folks lived in the city. Correct? Mm-hmm. So, and I think ultimately the biggest point of research is to, one, know the history. Because some things, we should not be making the same mistakes in 2019 that were made in 1919. Right. Come on, bruh. Right. Are we still doing the same? Have we not evolved? Okay.
So we need to maybe put a pause on this conversation, because I don't even think you even talked about there's a quote that talked about teachers.
Oh, yeah.
And I think we should end on that as something
Let
to
me
think
find
about.
it.
Here we go right here.
Oh, she found it already. See? I'm a keeper, y'all.
So this is, again,
what
talking
page
about...
Is that? On page 193 for those. Turn your books, hymnals, to page 193.
So black women as instruments of production. Again, we just scratched the surface. We didn't even scratch it, honestly, because there's so much richness in this article. So we're gonna have to do this again. But I want to draw attention to what she says here. Black women have maintained significant ties to the forces of production in the U.S. capitalist economy since the earliest years of forced productive, reproductive, and biological labor in the U.S. Throughout black women's history as both producers within the labor force, first slave, then wage.
See, wage is what got me mad. Okay, go ahead.
And biological reproducers of these labor forces.
Stop. Biological reproducers of these labor forces. So when we have children, how many times have we told children, go to school, get a good job? That meant you put them in the labor force. You didn't tell them, go to school, create a business. Okay, I just had to put that out there.
She has also maintained a role as reproductive laborer, whether as slave, domestic, or even within contemporary racialized, feminized careers, i.e. social work, teaching, nursing, etc.
So in looking at that, what has been interesting is teaching is considered a female-dominated profession. Now, I don't think that it's interesting, even though it is. I don't think that it's unusual that even in this female-dominated profession, the men folk typically are administrators. I said it. Mm-hmm. So that goes back to who won, race, gender, or class. Ding, ding, ding. Answer the question. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to point that out because what was interesting to me is they're saying that black women specifically, we're still producers and reproducers for the labor forces. And back then, we were slaves and we were breeders, correct? And then now it's saying we're doing the same job, but we get paid a little bit more for it. We still work like slaves, okay? That's why we always say we're going to the plantation, right? But they give us specifically racialized and feminized careers. Social work. How many friends do you have that are social workers? You know how hard they work and you know how much money they make. And in the grand scope of things, if you gave them $100,000, they still not making the money for all that work they're putting in. Think about teachers, same thing. Nurses already work 12-hour shifts and then they have overtime. I'm sorry, how are you having overtime beyond 12 hours?
Right.
Woo.
Yes. So I hope that this has been, again, you've been invited to our living room, our car.
Right.
So our date night in this conversation.
Right.
And we plan to do more conversations.
As we plan to be Dr. and Dr. DeVoe.
Right. So, yes. So we will continue to hash this out. But I think we do need to have a part 2 on this and invite some.
I hope you all respond. Call us.
So please download the article. We're going to post the information. So to make it easier for you, maybe post the link so that you can have this article and engage in some discussion around this. And how does it relate to your work, your practice, your passion, whatever that is? And
I'd also like to say this was not to exclude our men that are listening, because you have a voice here. Womanism, that's what I liked about it. It was inclusive of the whole. And so males and females are needed. And I think this conversation is important because men, you come from a woman, you might be married or have a girlfriend, or you might have a daughter, right? So this information is not only, if you can't use it personally, which I think it would be great for you personally, but it is also important to be able to share it with your sisters, with your wives, with your mothers, with your nieces, right? These are some very important conversations that when we send young people out into the world, we want them to have a solid foundation. So, as we wrap up, I am G. Funmilyo DeVoe of Urban Teachers Lounge, and you are?
I am IyaLami at Holistically Speaking.
Follow us everywhere. We will tell you where to follow us. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Podomatic, YouTube.
That's right.
I think we're everywhere. Did we name everything?
I think we did.
I think we did.
Please do follow us and look forward to hearing your conversation on this topic and many more that we have on Holistically Speaking and Urban Teachers Lounge.
All right. Peace, power, and progress.